Harleen Walia is the Deputy Director of the Childline India Foundation. She is skilled in the policy analysis, capacity building, donor management, government relations, and civil society engagement. Her experience also includes that of being a UNICEF supported senior consultant for child protection in the Ministry of Women and Child Development, a training and development specialist in the UN Office and Drugs and Crime, a gender program officer in the Center for World Solidarity, the coordinator of the Psychological Rehabilitation and Child Protection Program, coordinator for Sanla India, where she started her journey as a counselor and as a Montessori teacher at Young Leaders School, Kolkata, which she started with the founder. Welcome, ma'am. The floor is open for you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you all, even though it's virtually, with people in Hyderabad. I've lived and worked in Hyderabad for 2 years, and it was one of the most engaging periods, professional periods in my entire career of over 2 decades, not 3 decades, uh, as your director was saying earlier, but 2 decades, yes, over 2 decades, and it's really good to be back in Hyderabad. Makes me feel as if I'm home. I'm here today. I've been listening intently to the views expressed by the earlier two speakers, and I would hope that the audience here today, and there are a large number of people, even though it's quite late in the evening, will want to know a little more about the one and only helpline for children in India, the one and only exclusive helpline for children in India, which is Childline. Childline identified by the number 1098. You look at it and you read it as 1098, but it's 1098. So I'm looking forward to this interaction with all of you and to your questions, which I'm sure will follow. Basically want to talk to you about, because the issue or the topic for today's discussion was to give an overview of first responders and also victims, and what kind of victim assistance is available, and what are the mental health issues that are found and dealt with by first responders. I will be not talking in a generic manner on mental health issues or on first responders per se. I will be restricting my discussion, my sharing to Child's Line and the kind of work that it does as a first responder. So I'm not sure how many people in the audience, and I don't know if there are people from other time zones and countries as well, apart from our learned guest prior to me in the audience. However, for the benefit of everybody who's here, I'm not sure how many of you know what Child's Line is. It is the, as I said, the only exclusive helpline for children in India, and it is currently in its 25th year of existence. 20 years of which have been in partnership with Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India, and prior to that, as a project of Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So Childline is a very unique tele-outreach model. When we say that, we mean that in most in most helplines, what happens is that the help is provided when the call lands, and that is the extent of help, whether it's information or emotional support or counseling or and so on. In Childline in India, that is, you have a model where not only is the call for assistance and help received when a child is in crisis or a concerned adult calls on behalf of the child, but also physically a unit reaches out to the child or the adult who has made that call where such a physical reaching out is required. So I'm stressing on this because every call that lands in Childline does not need a physical reaching out by the Childline unit or the team at the location of the caller. When it is required, the team reaches out within a mandated time and connects to services. So as I was saying, it's a partnership. It's a partnership on many, many levels. It is unique. I heard while the question and answer session of the previous speaker was going on, there was a reference to a United Nations convention. I presume the reference was to the United Nations Convention on Rights of the Child, UNCRC. I'd just like to add one bit of information there, which is that it is the most endorsed convention in the entire world. Of all the UN conventions, this is the one and only which has, except for US, every single country in the world has endorsed this convention, has signed it or acceded to it. India has acceded to it in 1992. The part of the convention, one of the components of the convention is to create a space where children can access help, a direct space between beneficiary and the helping body, institution, mechanism. And one of the examples given is of a helpline. Childline is virtually a playing out of India's commitment to the UNCRC by provision of an exclusive helpline for children. It's a first. Childline was one of the first helplines ever, and it's in India. It's made in India. It was one of the first helplines ever, and it was a helpline which inspired the creation of such helplines in many, many countries. We are told in 143 countries. The link was that the person who founded Childline, discovered Childline, and was at that point of time, like many of your teachers today who are listening in, an assistant professor in an academic institution in Tata Institute of Social Sciences. During her field project, and this is Jeru Bilumoria that I'm referring to, and during her field project with street children and her discussion with them, she was told by the children that we manage most things, but there are times where we just need someone to talk to, someone who will pick up the phone and say, "Hello, I'm there for you." And that is how Childline was born. The number itself came from children. Thus, no art, 1098, counting backwards. They said, this is easy to remember. And that's the story, that's the history with which we work. So it's inspired this service in many countries. But as I said earlier, the thing to remember is that in most countries, it is not a tele-outreach service. It is a telephone service. In India, it is a tele-outreach service where the team actually goes to the child. The other unique thing about Childline in this country, about the helpline in this country, is that it is a partner. It's a public-private partnership with the government of India, right? And if this partnership was not there, in all likelihood, Childline would not have reached the number of children and achieved the kind of scale and coverage that it has today. So it is because of this partnership. It's a very good model of how a government and a non-government entity have worked together on child protection. There are many partnerships of this sort now. However, they do not have, in most cases, in all cases, in fact, they do not have a strong funding relationship. The government of India funds Childline, the Childline units on the ground, almost 100%. So that is how strong the partnership is. It's a co-implementing agency. So Childline is a partnership at many levels. And I'll come to the most important partnership in the end. But before that, prior to that, Ministry of Women and Child Development, Tata Consultancy Services. The call lands through a technology and to an infrastructure which has been created specially for Childline by Tata Consultancy. So your call lands in a TCS complex. The people receiving the call are Childline India Foundation employees. They are childliners. They are chosen by us and trained by us. However, The complex, the infrastructure, the software, it has all been customized and created for us by TCS, for which we are eternally grateful. Apart from that, the other essential component in this helpline is the fact that it results in that outreach which we spoke about. So not only do you have co-implementing at every stage, from the partnership at the center with the government, with Ministry of Women and Child Development, to the partnership with state governments and district administrations, which are a part of the Childline model under the Child Protection Services Scheme, and data consultancy services, and location-based, district-based civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, where the Childline unit for a particular district is housed. These are the units which reach out to a child when a caller calls from their location and provide the services as required. So you have a partnership with civil society organizations. We call it a social franchise model where we are all knitted together by one vision and one mission. That's what 1098 is. Yeah, it's different organizations, but all knitted together by one vision and one mission. The most important partnership, as I mentioned earlier, is with the child. So the child who started the whole concept of a child helpline so many years ago in 1996 continues to be the center of our program. The way we perceive it as the child being the center of our program is that till today, wherever there is a child line, there are regular mandated activities, not just case response, but activities with children to get feedback on the helpline, to assess or to get an idea of their problems, to take their problems to the right duty bearers and stakeholders, and to get solutions for them. So this entire influence, impact, ownership of a child and what the child needs on Childline is very, very strong till today. This is, as I said, the vision and mission that ties all Childliners together. And to the extent that even if after you leave Childline and you're not working, because we are professionals and people move from one place to another. Even after you leave Childline, the saying goes, once a childliner, always a childliner. So wherever you are, you keep interacting with childlines and you keep helping out in your capacities. We are based on our vision is very simple. It's a child friendly nation. It sounds simple, very difficult to achieve because children being what they are in policies and laws supposed to be of the highest priority. However, in the daily run and routine of governance, children are one category which tends to get neglected, which tends to get deprioritized, not because we always want to, but because it just so happens. And our aim is therefore, our mission is therefore to try and connect with every child who needs assistance, to catalyze a system that exists so that it responds to children, to integrate the efforts of various stakeholders, whether it's academicians, whether it's the police, whether it's the juvenile justice system, whether it's the state and district administration, whether it's media, all stakeholders concerned to integrate their efforts and work towards creating this child-friendly nation. Most importantly, to make child protection everybody's business, not just ours. Just a snapshot to give you an idea of the scale and coverage that I was talking about. So yes, I don't want to focus on earlier years, and I do want to talk a little bit about this quantum that you can see on your screen. The main thing that we need to take away from here is that it's an operation now, an emergency service now, a first responder service now. And I would categorically state that yes, 1098 is a first responder because we respond when a call comes in. So we respond whenever a person is reaching out for help, whenever a child needs assistance and we hear of it. That's one way of responding. The other way of responding is when our teams are going out on outreach in the locations where they are based, the childline units, and they see a child in trouble and they respond. So we are first responders in both ways, preventing the abuse and exploitation through outreach and connecting with service, and responding to a call which lands on 109. So talking about these calls, I'd like to bring your focus, to urge your focus actually, to the past 7 months or so, say from the 20th March to now, which has been a period of critical challenges and great learning and opportunities for 109. And we have struggled, but we have also been there, fought it out and stood by our mandate of putting the child first. So I'd like you to focus on those 7 months. When we talk about calls being answered, we talk about every single call which is landing at 1098. So we're talking about 24 lakh calls between April to September. I'm not taking the first 10 days of the lockdown into consideration, 11 days or so. So between April to September, we're talking about over 24 lakh calls. When we say calls have been answered, every single call, and I repeat, I would like to reiterate that because this is not often understood by most people. Every single call is not a call asking for help from abuse and exploitation to the helpline. There are numerous calls which are calls for information, numerous calls which are prank calls, numerous calls which are abusive calls. Just like you have trolls online, you also have trolls on the telephone. So there are numerous calls which are of those sorts. There is a huge category of calls which we call confidence building calls, where you actually have a child calling in but not speaking, and you can hear the sounds in the background, but you cannot hear the child doesn't say anything. And then after 3 or 4 calls, the child speaks. Sometimes that call, we call them confidence building calls. Sometimes those calls start with a very innocuous question. Oh, what do you do? It may not talk about what the child is experiencing, but we believe that every child who takes the trouble of calling 1098, you're actually making that child more safe because they know there's a number there that they can reach out to if they're feeling unsafe. So there are those calls. So many categories of calls. And apart from those, you have calls, as I mentioned earlier, which require the childline unit at the location of where the child is, the location of where the child is, to reach out and to help the child. We are talking about we are talking about over 2 lakh interventions. These interventions where the local unit had to reach out to the child. We are talking about being present in 595 districts. That's the coverage. And we are talking about an operation, all these things that we do, from call landing to call response to outreach to preparing the soil for collaboration based on the mission statements, the 4 C's that I spoke about, to engaging with stakeholders, catalyzing the system. All that we do is through 5 childline contact centers. You would call them call centers, we call them contact centers because that's where the child reaches us, contacts us. And these are, as I said earlier, in TCS. We do it through 4 regional resource centers, 4 offices, and the local outreach through 830 partner organizations, including 1,000 childline units. You're talking about a 10,000 numbered force completely dedicated to protect children. In recent times, and you have one in Hyderabad, I'm not sure if any of you have seen it, but you have two actually now. There are child help desks There are child health tests which are existing in railway stations. And since 2015 to now, uh, more than over a lakh children, a lakh 15 children have been assisted. So I'm sorry, the screen has frozen as it was earlier. So I guess there is some problem. Ah, it's moved now. So this is the coverage that we were talking about. We also cover all the 100 NCRB districts, the districts which uh, the first speaker had referred to, the NCRB, and we talk about the 100 topmost districts where cases against children have been seen and filed. And we have covered, Childline is present there as well. So it's very clear, I repeat again, for us, Childline views any violation of rights as abuse. Any violation of rights. So if a child has the right to an education and is not able to go to school for whatever reasons, and we are not able to provide those services to that child, then to us it means it's a violation of rights. And it is an abuse which needs to be addressed. I'm saying this because a number of calls that we get are not related to violence per se. They are not all trafficking, labor, child marriage, child sexual abuse, physical abuse, runaway children. They are not all those calls. There are many calls which come to us for school fees, and we connect them with emergency support. There are with services. There are many calls which come to us for a birth certificate because they cannot get admission. There are many calls which come to us, where the child simply wants to talk because the child is troubled or scared or anxious. There is no violence in the child's life, but the child is scared and has questions. So there are various kinds of calls which come to Childline, and we provide services as required. This is a gamut of headlines which each one of us sees in the newspaper. Nothing to be excited about. Actually, it's quite depressing listening to the news or seeing the newspaper nowadays, or forever. But this is the background or the premise with which we work. These are the kind of issues. So, as I mentioned earlier, there would be issues related to health, where a child has had an accident and they need a hospital service. They do not have the finances for that. It may be something to do with entitlements, as I mentioned. So, a caste certificate, a birth certificate, we help them by connecting them with authorities, getting them that certificate. These are all categories of intervention. When I repeat again, therefore, those cases where the local childline unit has reached out to the child and helps the child to get the service. These are those children. I'm not talking about those calls which are received at the childline contact center and are dealt with at the telephone level itself. Those calls, for instance, which require emotional support and guidance. When a child is anxious, the example I gave, you talk to the child and try to help them to ease their anxiety. So this is the three-layered. I've already spoken about it a bit, but these are the three layers. So your CCC, on one side, you have the national and regional resource centers on the other, and you have your local childline unit in the center. This is the model that we see of childline when you look at it from the national perspective. This is what happens when the call lands. So at the Childline Contact Center, as I mentioned earlier, thanks to Tata Consultancy Services, we have a software, we have a hands-free system, we have a resource directory built in so that the caller, the Childline Contact Officer can immediately find out where the caller is, take down details. So it's a hands-free system. We have data analytics and case documentation going on, and every call is recorded for a certain period of time. That recording is kept for a year at least, and all calls are assessed for quality. This is the model that you see at the district. where your local childline unit is functioning. So you actually have the DM or the DC as the head of what we call the Childline Advisory Board. And they are supposed to meet at least twice a year, where issues related to 1098 are flagged and solutions sought. So the Childline Advisory Board has members from all departments. So it will be health, education, it will be Panchayati Raj, it will be labor, it will be police. There will be various representations. Childline works very closely with all stakeholders, does not work. So if you talk about a rescue, for instance, if it's a rescue in any situation, it will be with the department concerned. If it's a child marriage rescue, there will be the child marriage prohibition officer uh, who is in the loop and works with them. If it's child labor, there'll be a child labor task force. If it's sexual abuse or any other such matter, it will be the police first. So every stakeholder is informed before a rescue operation is conducted. What do we do once Childline reaches there? Because the question was, what kind of assistance is available? The reason why I'm dwelling on all this is because, as a child protection practitioner for so many years now, it gives me a feeling of hope that at least in India, we have managed to put in place a system. Yes, the system works with varying degrees of efficiency and success in every location. But the system is there. Now it's up to us how we make it stronger, how we build capacities, and how we help it to help children better. So this is how the system works. You call where it is required. If the call can be dealt with, or your request or your for information or your support that you need can be dealt with on the telephone, it is. If not, your details are taken and the local unit is uh, informed. The childline team rushes to where the child is, provides the emergency care. That can be medicines, food, emotional support. We don't call it counseling. Please let me say this again. This is another thing I want to reiterate, like I did about calls, that all calls do not require us to rush out physically to the child. The other thing I want to stress is that Childline is not a mental health expert. It does not have that expertise at various levels. We are trying to build not expertise, but some skills in mental health support, in psychosocial first aid, uh, for the for the past 2 years, and it's still work in progress. But what we do believe in, and what Childline does provide, is emotional support and guidance. And it comes from the strong commitment of every childliner that the child has to be, the best interest of the child has to be protected. So this is what happens. They provide all that, and then the help for the FIR where required, the help to be the production before the Child Welfare Committee, and then whatever happens because the child is now safe, if the child is CNCP, child is produced before CWC. Again, I'm saying this because if the child needs a caste certificate and the team is reaching out to them for that, or if the child needs to be taken to the hospital, then there's no requirement to produce before CWC. That medical help or the food or the fees or whatever is required is provided, and the authorities are informed based on if the child is CNCP and such help is required from the JJ system. Then, based on the Child Welfare Committee's directions, the child is referred for restoration rehabilitation. Now, a rehabilitation system, again referring to some of the questions that had come up earlier, is only as good as we make it. So through 1098, we do try to maintain some level of standards, some level of follow up, and we try to ensure that the child is safe till the case is closed for us, until the child is in safe custody of the system or the family. So, depending on what the CWC directs, it can be a home study report, it can be, some kind of counseling for the child, it can be providing legal aid for the child, where we connect with services. So, it can be varied kinds of things which the childline accedes to, which the childline provides. Focus, as I said, on the last 7 months very quickly, because I know that I don't have so much of time. Uh, we are looking at a situation in Childline where our entire operations, our entire work was almost turned upside down. So we are an emergency response service. We are an emergency service, outreach service, yes. But Childline, in its 24 years of existence, has not seen the scale of emergency that we have encountered through the pandemic. And it has been a learning experience for us. The first message that we sent out, and that's what you're seeing on your screens now, is that Childline is not locked down. We were working all the time. We are talking about a situation where in the first 1 week, we saw call volumes really shoot up. And we saw people who attend to about 100, 150 calls actually responding to 300 calls, 350 calls. And this was happening primarily because people were very scared. They were trying to get through to any helpline possible. So we were getting a lot of calls which were frantic with fear, frantic with anxiety about COVID. What is it? What is Corona? And now we see there were calls for food, there were calls for shelter, there were calls which were based on anxiety and questions. Now we see those calls plateauing. Now, as in the last 3 months, what we have seen is those calls have become calls for information, panicking. They have plateaued, more or less. In fact, within the first 15 days itself, we saw the call volume coming back to somewhat more. We're still talking about 24 lakh calls, yes. And we're still talking about over 2 lakh interventions in 7 months, yes. However, the per day volume or the quantum that we experienced in the first week itself, the first 10 days, that has plateaued and gone back to the way it was, more or less, but not completely. And I'll come to that a little later. More or less the way it was before the lockdown was declared. So here it is. We're actually talking about altogether more than 27 lakh calls. Yes, and we are talking about if we take from March, 20th March to now, to 30th of September. If we do not include the first 1 week, then it works out to 24 lakh calls. So in that first 1 week itself, there was a spurt of calls, as I was saying, and a spurt of interventions of about 4,000 interventions at that time. Again, I reiterate that this works out to about more than 15,000 calls in a day. We're talking about, and it averages out to more than 1,100 interventions in a day. 1,100 reaching out to children where that reaching out was required. This is where we got our maximum number of calls from. And if you look at the kind of calls, which I'll come to in the next slide, then you'll realize why these states were, of course, there's a population question also, because the more people, the more calls. There's awareness. That's one of the reasons why these states called. But also, these were the states which were very affected either by reverse migration or they were affected by COVID itself. And so most of our calls in this period altogether have come from these states. I think Odisha is one of the late entrants. However, they are reporting a lot of interventions now, especially related to protection from abuse. So, therefore, featuring in this 7 months analysis, 6 months analysis. Kindly note, because as I said earlier, that children and concerned adults call us. So, out of those 2 lakh interventions that we are talking about, 39,000 calls were directly from children. You would say, is that a lot? No, we would say our understanding is that with lockdown, the children not being able to go to school, the children not being able to step out to play with and meet their friends and other people, our understanding is that maybe children were not able to call. They were not able to call, as many children were not able to call as they would have if they were able to be out and access other people, other friends or other people. And this is what our experience with the previous years in comparison with that tells us. The calls, of course, maximum come from mobile. So all children do not have mobiles. That's another reason why you have 39,000 calls from children and the rest from concerned adults. Of these calls, another thing that I would like to mention is that you have an almost 50-50 balance between those which landed directly on 1098, and those which were purely interventions which were reported through outreach. So even in times of pandemic, you had the Childline team going out for relief work or other activities, seeing vulnerable children and reporting a case and providing the assistance. This was happening. So it's almost a 50-50 balance. Most of these, it's important to note, and that's why these 6 months are such a huge learning, that 58%, and this has fluctuated from 62 to 58% of these calls that have come to us in these 6 months have been related to COVID related. It's been related to food, it's been related to shelter, it's been related to anxiety, it's been related to health. However, in the last 3 months, since the unlockdown process has started, we've seen a rise in what we call core child protection concerns, which is your protection from abuse. And protection from abuse doesn't only mean sexual abuse. It includes a wide gamut of cases from abandonment, runaway children, missing children, begging children, labor, trafficking, marriage, uh, and also sexual abuse, physical abuse, corporal punishment, and so on. So these were also being reported to us by these children. We see the South Zone gets almost over 40% of these protection from abuse cases. The largest category of protection from abuse cases is regarding child marriage. Surprising, but not so, considering that in these times of and in these times of complete insecurity, there may have been families who were organizing these marriages. So with the with the reasoning that maybe it would be better this way for their daughters. However, child marriage being as as social an issue as it is, it's surprising for us also. It happens every year during Akshaya Tritiya in and around up to August. But we saw that the child marriage cases also, the reporting has shot up after May end. The first 2 months, if you compare with last year, there were almost 40% less cases being reported to us about child marriage. But this has steadily been going up. What we see in the past 2 weeks is child labor, child begging. These are being reported more and more, telling us a story of what is happening with those families, how critical it is for them to get support now, and reasons for why their children are out or being pushed out into labor or there's several things which Childline has done since the pandemic started, which included first creating a standard script because there were so many panic calls coming. If people were asking, what is corona? What is COVID? Am I going to die tomorrow? What are my chances of getting this infection, etc., etc.? The Childline team had to, at the call receiving point, had to immediately create those scripts, had to start online training with teams, had to organize transport because transport stopped. Lockdown ensured that transport was not available, but case response had to be done. Children had to be reached out to when they were calling for help. So, therefore, organizing that transportation. And alongside that, and this is where your topic and its connection with mental health issues and victim assistance comes in. Victim assistance and mental health is something which we still talk about. We don't talk about it enough, mind you, but we talk about it. However, victim assistance and the mental health of the first responder, of the care provider, is something that we do not talk about often. It's something that we do not even recognize very often. Whether the first responder is a policeman, whether the first responder is a child life. So this particular pandemic has brought sharply to our notice the immediate need of addressing the care of the caregiver, and which is what we've been focusing on. So psychosocial, a manual for psychosocial first aid, which I mentioned earlier that we provided, that capacity building for our childliners was created. One opportunity that the pandemic has given us is through the online mode, like I'm talking to you today. I haven't been to Hyderabad in the past 8 years, maybe. However, through the online mode, at least with very little resources, except time being invested, we are able to reach out and communicate far more easily to our partners, to the local childline units. So we have organized trainings because capacities, as mentioned by the earlier speaker, also the capacities of the first responder are again an area of neglect. The training is an area of neglect. Understanding their own mental health requirements is an area of neglect. And we have been focusing on this during the pandemic. So a lot of capacity building initiatives have started, and as my screen is showing, they are continuing and will continue, especially on mental health and its integration into a protection program. Childline has been the 58% that I spoke about earlier has been working seamlessly and fearlessly with district administration and state government for relief work. So we have assisted over 160,000 families, almost 161,000 families. 161,000 families with dry ration, sanitization material, with masks, with sanitizers, and so on and so forth. Food, we have been working not just in providing this relief, but we have also been raising awareness, disseminating information about 1098, about the other stakeholders who are involved, who the vulnerable populations can reach out to for help. We've been changing our, as I said right at the outset, children continue to be at the center of our work. So all the families that we came into contact with were actually families where there were children who were very affected by requirements for food, shelter, medical help, and so on. That's how we came into contact with them. We have been flipping our ways of engaging with children. So you have innovations coming in. You have online, discussions with children. Say, for instance, Kerala, they're doing drama, they're doing study activities, they are doing play activities, all through the online mode. I'm giving you examples. These kind of competitions, drawing competitions in Maharashtra, in certain districts. So these various child lines in the Northeast, various child lines across the country are adapting because it's mandated that you have to engage with children at least once a month. Your child population that you work with, the vulnerable population that you've mapped. So they are doing these activities online instead of face to face. We, of course, case management I've mentioned, and I would like to again focus on the fact that we are uh, putting a lot of emphasis on the mental health support for caregivers, not just the units who are stepping out with all their fears and anxieties, including the fear for their families who they might infect, but also the childline contact officers who are receiving those calls. And as one CCO told me, at the end of the day, hearing one call after another that we don't have food, we don't have food, we don't have food, I felt like just taking off my headphones and not listening anymore because I felt so helpless. So these are situations which are being reported to us and we are dealing with them. In the future, as we move along, we are organizing webinars on the self-care. We are organizing, creating learning management system with online modules where our teams, childliners will be able to access, and also getting into a partnership with NIMHANS. NIMHANS is going to help Childline develop an entire mental health program initiative, which will be integrated with the Childline program. We've created all these letters, campaigns, resource corners, and provisions to register a case uh, during this period, again, to better communication. This is the case reporting. In case people can't call us, they can report online as well if they can't reach us. The material being created, the newsletters, and trying to build the morale of the team. Building capacities to handle disasters and child protection in emergencies. This is what we are looking at. understanding their own requirements, understanding their own anxieties, and how to look after themselves is also what we are looking at. Transportation and other things I've mentioned, these are the challenges. It is an essential service. It is not declared officially an essential service, but it is essential for those who reach out to it. And we are stressing that in an emergency, just like there are others who have been called Corona warriors, the childliner who is going out to receive that call, the childliner who is going out to assist the child, is also in his or her own way a complete frontline warrior who deserves at the least to be recognized as such. Going forward, I think as India prepares itself, because we were not prepared for this. We were not prepared. We have dealt with it to the best of our abilities. It's not just 1098, but the entire country. And as we go forward, we need to ensure that the children do not go out of focus where protection is concerned. We need to ensure that all measures for preventing or being in readiness of any such spike or emergency in the future is in place. That is what we are working with, and especially widespread awareness about the fact that there is a helpline number which will reach out to children when required. So please write to us. This is what we have to say about what we have done as first responders to assist victims even during the pandemic period, and how, as I said earlier, mental health, which was not a core focus of the Childline program in terms of skills, is something that we are focusing on as we go forward, not just for the children we assist, but also especially for the people who are assisting these children, because we think that will definitely impact, or that does definitely impact the quality of services that you provide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the enlightening talk. I'm sure that people will, after the speech, people will try to focus more on the importance of the first responders. Ma'am, we have some questions for you from the attendees. Hamruta, please put some of the
Good evening,
questions.
ma'am. I'll be presenting the questions raised by the participants from the Google form provided, followed by the questions from the chat box. Ma'am, how can we support the victim of child abuse to ensure their mental health when they face abuse from their own family members?
So, of all the various situations in which abuse takes place, this is probably one of the most difficult situations that you can deal with. However, I think every space that a child goes to, say for instance a school, or say for instance a neighborhood play spot, like a playground, every single person who engages with children should create a space so that at least the child can talk to you about the abuse. If the child is able to tell you about the abuse that is happening, that is the first step. How you will help the child after that is actually the remaining part of the journey. But the first help that you can give is to create these spaces wherever you are engaging with children to make them comfortable so that they can talk to you about it. They can tell you about it, right? Parallelly, if it's in school, for instance, or in any other place, you can talk about 1098, you can talk about services which are available, you can show them movies such as Komal so that they understand. So it's key for them to even know that there are people who they can reach out to who can help them. So one is creating that space. Second is giving them information that these numbers and these people exist to help you. Third is giving them information of what abuse is. Many children don't realize it. So when you picture abuse, a lot of people imagine or see, they think of a lot of pain, they think of a lot of humiliation, they think of a whole lot of scenarios. But in many cases of child abuse, pain may not be a feature till a very, very long time. But if the child is made aware much before, or due to the constant interaction with other stakeholders, is made aware of what abuse is, then they would be able to recognize it the first time it happens to them. And if you give them the space to report it, they would be able to report it. So these are some of the ways to help. What happens after that is, of course, you ensure confidentiality, you connect the child to the service provider who can provide that. So every single person, the two things that I mentioned, but three things actually, of creating a space for the child, of informing the child about who can help, and about informing the child about what abuse is. Those are the three things which anybody can do with every child you engage with. What happens afterwards when the child needs more specialized attention and care? Please connect the child to the service providers, whoever is a service provider. Okay, especially in a family situation, it becomes important in every situation, in any situation, but more so in a family situation. It becomes important to understand who can be the person in the inner circle who can help the child. Yeah, that person has to become your accomplice, or your partner in helping the child.
I have another question.
Sure.
Many children are not aware what they are supposed to do or whom to resort to when they are subjected to abuse. So, in this situation, do you think schools should play an active role in educating the children in this regard?
Yes. So I mentioned this earlier, and I think I used school as an example. So I think I've answered this question. Yes, absolutely. And there are specific things that schools can do. I would like to inform you all that there's an initiative called Nishtha under the Ministry of Education, which is for training of teachers. And Childline has been involved with them and has trained over 20,000 teachers last year. And Nishtha has just gone digital. So they'll be creating e-learning modules, and they will be creating e-learning spaces where teachers can go on and learn about how to help children recognize abuse as also. And that is the topic for us. There are other teaching oriented, pedagogy oriented topics which are there, but ours was specifically rights, abuse, and POXO. So schools, yes, they play a critical role because the largest amount of time that a child spends, the longest time that a child spends away from family is at school. So yes, they do play.
I have another question.
Yes.
As child crime rates are increasing, what, according to you, could be the reason and how can we tackle the reasons?
Okay. Uh, I'm not sure whether crime rates are increasing if we're talking about a particular kind of crime. But what I am sure about is that there is much more awareness, and so there's much higher reporting. So this is a debate which is, in child protection, in the child protection sector also, this is a discussion that we have all the time, that if so and so state, I'm not going to take any names, but if so and so state is reporting the highest number of calls related to child marriage, okay, which I mentioned as one of the biggest issues that have come up in during the pandemic period. Does that mean that that state has the highest number of child marriages? I would answer no. I would say one of the reasons why there's such high reporting may definitely be that there's a much higher level of awareness. And civil society and stakeholders have given that confidence to people that you can call here and get the child marriage stopped. So I would actually look at it from that lens. Though that does not mean that the problem does not exist there. It just means that yes, there is more awareness. I would say that. So I don't know if crimes against children have really shot up, or crimes committed by children have also shot up. This is often reported by media, but we see that yes, there is much more reporting of abuse by children and by adults. So if it's by adults also, that means awareness, isn't it? They're concerned adults, not just the child calling us. So there were over 2 lakh interventions. Of that, if even 20% were related to abuse, then of those 2 lakh interventions, there were 30,000 children calling us. So if you do the maths also, you will see a lot of adults are calling, which to me is an indicator of awareness. This is my understanding.
I would wish to ask one last question. How awareness should be spread to reach out to children, especially in remote and slum areas?
Okay, so India has a very rich tradition of community engagement, whether it's in remote areas or it's in slum areas. We are an extremely social population. Our culture is, that's why the pandemic has hit us with anxiety and depression so much, because we are not able to meet each other face to face, right? So, any opportunity, you'll find people on the roads, you'll find people talking, you'll find groups of people. So, we should actually use this culture, we should use this backbone to spread the message of awareness, whether it is using local media, whether it is doing jatras in Bengal, whether it is doing street theatre in other places, whether it is organizing campaigns before Akshaya Tritiya, specifically about child marriage, yeah, whether it is organizing, large scale, what should I say, large scale information dissemination related to exam stress and strife before results are supposed to come out. We had created WhatsApp messages for students, which was circulated through the network. So there are various things, that can be done to spread the messages, whether it's in a rural area. Social media is not the world. Virtual and online is not the only world. We have very strong community connects in India, and we should be using those community connects to spread messages. Basically, Hamrita, what I feel strongly is that a safe neighborhood will result in safe children. So if families, communities consider it as their responsibility that every child around them is safe, makes themselves aware, and builds those interactions by which children can talk about what they are going through, builds those spaces where children can talk, then whether it's a rural community where the community connect is much stronger, or an urban slum where there is a huge overpopulation but there's also a very strong community, it would be easy for us to tell them about, make children safe there, to tell them about how to prevent abuse.
I have one more question.
I thought that was your last question.
Yes, ma'am, but the participants have raised this in the chat box, so I thought.
No, please go on. Please go on.
Thank you, ma'am. Recently, in one of the Indian states, there has been an extremely extreme case of child abuse where the owner poured boiling water on the child. Such incidents will forever haunt the victim. So, how should we tackle such a situation?
So, as I said earlier, I think my answer to your earlier question is also connected with this question, Hamita. That if you have community connect, and you have community awareness, if you take the trouble to do outreach and spread the message that this is acceptable and this is not acceptable, then there are a lot of things which will not happen. If it does happen, God forbid, if it does happen, and it does happen, that's our reality. Yeah. If it does happen, then there are various things that can be done. Most importantly, the person who's gone through the experience, we don't only have to focus on the physical impact of that experience, but we have to ensure that there is some kind of support for what could have been the mental impact as well, how it would have harmed or how it would have affected the emotional state, the psychological state of that particular child. Parallel to that, it's very important to get justice. So there are laws related to corporal punishment. There are laws related to cruelty against children. There are laws related under the JJ Act itself. There are provisions related to physical abuse. People should be held responsible when their actions result in a child being affected. But for the child, not just medical help, and you have 1098 to call, but also psychological help would be very important for the child to be able to process that incident and to get back to life.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering all the questions.
My pleasure.
Ma'am, I would like to thank you for being there today as one of the speakers, and would really like to acknowledge the information that has been shared to us, to all our participants, and to everyone, every practitioner, professional who has joined in this event today. Before we end, I would like to invite our faculty head, Mr. Radhakrishnan sir, who is the professor of political science, assistant professor of political science, to please deliver the vote of thanks. So over to you.
Thank you, Suraj. It is so overwhelming that I have run out of words. Words don't come easy, but it's my duty and privilege to thank all the resource person. Firstly, I take this opportunity to thank Mr. Surendra Kumar for speaking from the law enforcement perspective. I wish to thank Professor George Richards for speaking from the vantage point of scholarship and research. And finally, I wish to thank Ms. Harleen Walia ma'am for speaking from the grassroots level, what you witness day to day and how you have been engaging with the civil society and interacting with the Indian state. And this was quite a learning experience for all of us. There's a lot of positive message and inputs. And as the director sir said that we would certainly like to explore the possibilities for some kind of academic tie-up. I also take the opportunity to thank our director, Professor Sarfraz Ahmed Khan sir, for his consistent encouragement. He has always, set the bar high for us so that we conduct webinars, we have adequate research and publication on all fronts. So we are very thankful to him. I also thank the Deputy Director, Dr. Anuradha Binuri, for her support. And this is also the time where I would specifically, like to mention Mr. Ramesh, our IT head. He has been literally burning the midnight oil, I would say. It's a one-man army. I thank him for all the help which he has been rendering to the entire institute throughout the pandemic. I would like to thank Mr. Sampson, who is the Man Friday for the organization. And I wish to thank my esteemed colleague, Professor Hifazat Ali. Now, the team, International Cell and Center for Criminology and Criminal Justice, because their contribution which has made this webinar very successful. I thank all the members of the International Cell as well as the Center of Criminology and Criminal Justice for going all out, for putting in your best. And that's what we see in terms of the number of attendees who have waited till this moment. So I thank all the members, and this is the time where I would also specifically mention, that all the students have put in their efforts, and I would like to specifically mention few names because of paucity of time. Suraj, Anvita, Hamruta, and Kevin, thank you for all the help rendered for, successfully conducting the webinar. Thank you so much.